Hey everyone, welcome back. The book we're diving into today is one you specifically requested, Ajahn Sumedho's The Way It Is.
A fantastic choice. This book, it really gets to the heart of how mindfulness plays out in our daily lives, doesn't it?
It really does. And one of the things that struck me right off the bat was Sumedho's focus on the illusion of self. This idea that so much of our suffering stems from this mistaken belief in a solid, unchanging me.
hmm It's a common thread throughout Buddhist teachings, but Sumedho has this way of presenting it that just clicks.
Totally. And he uses this really clever example. He compares it to a child with a brand new toy.
Oh, yeah, I love that analogy. It's so true, isn't it?
It is. So think about it. Kid gets a new toy
hmm
for like 5 minutes. They're over the moon, think they found the key to lasting happiness, and then...
The novelty wears off. They want something else. And the cycle continues.
Exactly. And that's what Sumedho is getting at, right? This constant craving for the next thing, that feeling of never quite being satisfied. It comes from this fundamental misunderstanding of who we are. We cling to this idea of a permanent self when really everything is in flux.
It's the Buddhist concept of avijja, or ignorance. And it's that ignorance, that clinging, that leads to so much of our suffering, according to Sumedho.
It makes you wonder, though, how do we break free from that cycle? Because, I'm reading this and it's like he's describing my own thought patterns, this constant loop of, I want this, I need that, if only I had.
Oh, I hear you. It's like this never-ending to-do list in your head.
Exactly. It's exhausting.
And that exhaustion, that's the sound of clinging to the I, according to Sumedho. Not that the I doesn't exist, but it's more like a process, not a fixed entity. And we get so caught up in believing in I as this fixed thing that we miss out on actually experiencing life as it unfolds.
Which is tricky because it's so easy to get stuck in those thought loops, right? So how do we start to see things differently? Sumedho talks about learning to observe our thoughts and feelings without judgment. He uses that great metaphor of the mind as a mirror reflecting the universe.
It is a powerful image. But the thing is, and Sumedho doesn't shy away from this, accepting all our thoughts and feelings, even the messy ones, that's way harder than it sounds.
Tell me about it. There's some thoughts I'd rather just vanish to a distant galaxy somewhere.
Right. But Sumedho is saying those unpleasant thoughts and feelings we try so hard to avoid, those are our greatest teachers.
Ooh, okay. How so?
They show us where we're still holding on, where we're buying into that illusion of a solid self. So the real challenge he presents is, can we be with them, observe them, without getting completely swept away?
So how do we actually work with these unpleasant thoughts and feelings? If they're supposed to be our teachers, what are they trying to teach us?
That's where Sumedho's central teaching comes in, this idea of this is the way it is.
It sounds so simple when you put it like that.
Right. But think about it. When you're really in the thick of it, struggling with something, how often do you actually stop and say, this is the way it is?
Honestly, never.
Right. Our instinct is to resist, to fix, to wish things were different. It's like we're hardwired for make it go away mode.
Ugh, tell me about it. So what's the alternative? If we're not supposed to push away the difficult stuff, are we supposed to just wallow in it?
Not wallow, but lean in. And he connects this so beautifully to one of the Buddha's core teachings, the Four Noble Truths.
Okay, remind me about those.
So the first noble truth is dukkha, which is often translated as suffering. And Sumedho's point is we spend so much time and energy trying to avoid or deny suffering, when really he would say the path to liberation is through it.
Okay, hold on a second, because I know what some people might be thinking. Oh, wait, why would I willingly sign up for more suffering? It sounds kind of counterintuitive, right?
Totally. But Sumedho tells this great story. It's actually kind of funny, and it perfectly illustrates this idea.
Oh, is this the one about the meditation retreat?
Yes. He's in a meditation hall, totally settled into his practice, and then someone starts swallowing really loudly.
Oh, no.
And it totally throws him off. Like he gets completely annoyed by it.
I've been there.
And that's the point he's making. Often the suffering doesn't come from the actual event itself, the swallowing, but from our resistance to it.
So it's not the sound itself, it's my reaction to the sound.
Exactly. And that, my friend, is where the practice of non-attachment comes into play. One of the core principles of Buddhism is that true peace, true liberation, comes from letting go of our desires, our expectations, our need to control everything. We can't control the sounds the universe throws at us, but we can learn to work with our reactions.
It reminds me of those 3 insights he talks about in relation to the first noble truth. That there is suffering, that suffering should be understood, and that suffering has been understood.
There you go.
It's like To get to that place of non-attachment, we have to actually understand our suffering, not just experience it blindly.
Now you're getting it. And that understanding, that shift in perspective,
Mm.
it's not a one-time thing,
Yeah.
It's an ongoing practice, something we cultivate moment to moment to moment.
Okay, but non-attachment, easier said than done, right? Especially in those moments when, like you said, when you're in the meditation hall and someone's swallowing really
I
loudly.
hear you. It's not like we can just snap our fingers and suddenly we're enlightened beings floating above all the annoyances of life.
Exactly. So what do we do? I mean, one of the things I appreciate about Sumedho is that he offers these really practical tools. He doesn't just talk about these lofty concepts. He actually gives you ways to work with them in your everyday life.
Right. Absolutely. And one of the simplest, but also one of the most profound practices he emphasizes is using the breath as an anchor.
The breath.
Yeah. Something we do all the time, right?
Right.
Without even thinking about it. But when we bring our awareness to the breath, when we actually feel the sensations of each inhale and exhale, it has this incredible way of bringing us right into the present moment.
It's like a grounding technique almost.
It is. And it's so accessible. We always have our breath with us no matter what's going on.
It's true. So how does this tie back to everything else we've been talking about? The illusion of self, non-attachment.
It's all connected. See, Sumedho talks a lot about how everything is in constant flux, arising and ceasing moment to moment to moment.
Like that Heraclitus quote, "No man ever steps in the same river twice."
Exactly. And yet our minds, they want to cling to this idea of permanence,
Oh.
of a solid, unchanging self.
Right.
But by connecting with the breath, we start to glimpse the truth of impermanence,
Yeah.
the ever-changing nature of, well, everything, including ourselves.
Okay, I'm starting to see how it all fits together. And this is where it gets really interesting for me. Sumedho links this very simple practice of breath awareness to this really profound Buddhist teaching, dependent origination.
Yeah.
It's this idea that everything is interconnected, that nothing exists independently.
Exactly. And the way Sumedho talks about it, he emphasizes the role of consciousness in all of this.
How so?
He's saying, look, consciousness itself, it's also in constant flux, like a river, always flowing. And it's in those spaces between thoughts, in the quiet between all the noise, that we can actually tap into this deeper awareness he's talking about.
He even talks about paying attention to the spaces between thoughts.
He does. Which sounds kind of strange at first, right?
It does.
Yeah.
Because we're so used to trying to fill every silence to be on all the time.
Exactly. But Sumedho is suggesting that there's actually tremendous power in that emptiness, in the spaces between the notes, so to speak. And that's where things get really interesting, because it goes against everything our culture tells us about how to be successful, how to be happy.
Totally. We're so conditioned to strive, to achieve, to attain, even in our spiritual practice, right?
Right. And yet Sumedho leaves us with this incredibly powerful message. The truth is always present, but we don't see it if we're caught up in the idea of attainments, of me having to do something, of me having to get something.
Wow. It makes you wonder, can we ever truly let go of that desire, even the desire for enlightenment itself?
It's a great question. And one, I think Sumedho would probably say, is best explored through our own experience, through cultivating that quiet, observing mind.
You've given me a lot to think about. And to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive into Ajahn Sumedho's The Way It Is has given you some food for thought, some new tools for working with your own experience of, well, life.
It's been a pleasure exploring with you, as always.
Thanks for being here. And to everyone listening, keep exploring these ideas, keep asking those big questions, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.